Hey, what's going on, guys? How is everybody doing? So critical stats, they're going to haunt you and your heroes pretty much forever because let's be honest, we all want to be doing as much damage as possible. However, building your critical hits, building your critical rate and critical damage, they can be the most complicated part of building your heroes. And it's hard to know, whether enough is enough. You're doing your character more damage than good, or if you are hitting a bottleneck, because that is possible to do. But now is not the time to worry, because in this video, we're going to be going over everything that you need to know about critical hits, from the rates to the damage to where the bottlenecks are, how to optimize, all that stuff. In this video, we'll be going over from the very basic all the way up to the very complicated. So if you feel the need to jump around, if you are a more veteran player and you just want to get into how to fully maximize your character, I will be putting timestamps down in the description below, so you can go ahead and check those out, because like I said, we will be going from very basic all the way up to specific building of characters. Now, we have a lot of information to cover, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So the very first thing we're going to be doing is talking specifically about how critical hits are calculated, because they are kind of the building block upon everything we're going to be talking about moving forward. And as I said, we are going to start from the very basics, so that way we have a firm understanding of what critical hits actually are in this game. So you'll see right here on screen, we have three different calculations. So we have a non-critical hit, we have a critical hit, and a formula for attack power. Now, I've already done a full video breaking down the attack power formula and diving into more depth and how you can fully optimize this number. But in short, the things that we're going to want to take note of is that our base attack is going to be our character's base attack. That's like a completely naked character, no artifacts, no weapons, nothing, whatever that number is. And our weapons attack stat. This can also be found if you go up to your character's attributes under attack. It's going to be the white number, not the yellow number, just the white number. That's going to be your base attack stat, not your base attack, but your character's base attack stat. I know it's a little confusing, but if you watch that base attack video, it'll go into that more in depth. Your weapon attack percentages and artifact attack percentages, they're going to be added together separately. And finally, your flat attack bonuses from our artifacts, they're going to be added together separately. So in total, our attack power is built upon three different numbers. We have our base attack, our attack percentages, and flat attack. Those are all going to be useful later. Now, our attack power is not necessarily the damage we're going to be doing, but it is a necessary value to figure out our non-critical hits or just our normal hits. So the formula and how we get that value is not incredibly important to this video. However, what is important is that we want to take whatever final value we get there. We want to input it as well as your critical damage value. So let's say, for example, that the base value for critical damage for every character is 50%. And so let's take that and calculate a critical hit. So as an example, if our non-critical hits are hitting for 1,000 damage on enemy X, and our critical damage is 50%, we'd take 1,000, multiply that by 1.5, because 50% as a decimal is 0.5, so 1 plus 0.5 is 1.5. That's going to give us a final critical hit of 1,500. Now, that's kind of a long-winded explanation of some math that I think most of us take for granted, but like I said, some of these values, they're going to be more important in later stages in this video, and it can be nice to know how everything actually works together. So now that we know the basics of how critical hits work, couldn't we just build like 100% crit rate and call it a day? Just pretty much just get like a flat bonus, since all of our hits are going to be crits. So that would be nice, but unfortunately it doesn't really work like that. So in this article that was translated from MiHoYo's official website, the writer ran a number of tests to first determine whether or not a character's level could influence your crit rate in regards to your opponent's level. So if, for example, you are 15 levels under an opponent or 15 levels over, does that affect it in any way? Long story short, it doesn't. So then, removing that variable from the table, they then ran multiple tests, each with an incremental increase to the character's crit rate. And what they found was that there is a soft cap of 80%, meaning that any additional crit rate you put on your character past 80% is basically useless. So as you can see here, even when they put 134% crit rate on their character, they're still only experiencing a crit rate of just over 80%. So it really doesn't benefit you in any way going above 80%. The numbers are just not there. Okay, so that means that there's a soft cap of 80%. So instead of getting to 100%, why don't we just get to 80% and then deal with crit damage after the fact? Well, The problem with that is that even just getting to 80% crit rate is going to be a pretty big task. And even once you do that, you're probably not going to have, you know, the flexibility of now building in crit damage. It's going to be hard enough to get your crit rate up that high. So we can optimize, though. We can optimize your artifacts and weapons stats beyond that point. But for the next portion, we do need to understand how crit rate and crit damage are related in terms of their raw number. So if we take a look at these stats across 3-star to 5-star artifacts, between crit rate and crit damage, you'll notice that all the values are double. And if we move down here to the substats, you'll see that that pattern also continues. So what we can extrapolate from that is that crit rate and crit damage are relatable in terms of a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every 2 points of crit damage you have, the equivalent will be 1 point of crit rate. So a 10% crit rate will be the equivalent of an artifact with 20% crit damage. So now let's take a look at this chart, and we can see on average the damage increase you'll experience based on what your crit rate and crit damage are. So let's use the argument we were using before, right? Just jamming our crit rate up to 80%. Well, this chart unfortunately doesn't have 80%. It has 75 and 85. So we'll use those numbers both because 75 is a little bit under 80% and 85, like we discussed before, there are diminishing returns there. So we'll kind of use those two numbers as an average. So what we see is that at 50% crit damage, which is your base crit damage, we're going to have a rough damage increase of 37.5 to 42.5. Okay, it's not too bad. But let's say we cut back on our crit rate a bit. Let's say that instead of 80% crit rate, we have 35% crit rate. And that's not too bad. You can get that pretty easily by just leveling up like a substat weapon. Let's say like Viridescent Hunt, right? You can easily get to 35% crit rate. Now, since we know that the stats are related 2-to-1, we can take all the crit rate we lost, which is 40 to 50%, right? So 75 minus 35 is 40, so on. We can turn that into crit damage. That's going to be 80 to 100%, and add it into our crit base damage of 50, bringing us up to 130 to 150% crit damage. And as you can see, we're actually getting now a damage increase of 45.5 to 52.5%. which is quite a bit better than before. So to use this chart for yourself, the ideal crit rate to crit damage numbers are going to be highlighted in the bluish gray. The reasoning is this. If you start at 25% crit rate and 50% crit damage and move to the right up to, let's say, 90% crit damage, that's a 40% crit damage increase. We have a 10% damage increase overall. The same can be said if we add 20% crit rate. We also get a 10% damage increase. And as we know from before, the 20% crit rate and 40% crit damage are the same. However, if we add 20% crit damage and 10% crit rate, we'll actually find that we get a 12% increase in damage, meaning that it's most effective to increase both stats simultaneously in order to achieve maximum damage. Now we get to the part that I think will be most useful for veteran players and can help you take your builds even a step further. So this spreadsheet, I'll be leaving a link to it down in the description below. It's going to help you determine which main stat you should be choosing for your hero based on your full kit minus your circlet. So your circlet is the only artifact that can have a main stat of either attack percentage, crit rate, or crit damage. So out of all your artifacts, it's the easiest to change in order to positively affect your damage output. So to use a spreadsheet, we're going to have to fill in some values. So for this, what we're going to do, well, I'm going to be using my current build of Child for this. So first, on the right, we're going to enter in our base attack. Remember that from the beginning of this video, that's your character's base attack plus the attack of your weapon. Next, we're going to enter in the flat attack. This is the flat attack of your feather, as well as any other flat attack substats from all your other artifacts. Next, we'll input the attack percentage, which is on the left side. That's going to include your attack percentage from your weapon, if it's on there, and any of your artifacts. So make sure you add all those up. Next, your total crit rate and crit damage. And remember, all these values are without your circlet piece. So make sure you take that off before you do these calculations. And then based on what the original creators actually put here as a note, for elemental damage, you're only going to input a value here if you're doing elemental percentage 100% of the time. So like my Child, I'm not necessarily using him in his bow stance. I'm only using him in his melee stance. So that's why I have Hydro damage bonus here. You're probably only going to be able to put this here, you know, if you're using a caster, someone who's using elemental damage 100% of the time. So now that all the values have been inputted, we want to take a look at the percentage of the original. This is the added bonus we would receive for choosing a particular stat on our circlet. Currently, it looks like I'll be getting the most benefit from having an attack main stat circlet. However, I'm currently using a crit rate circlet because my circlet has an additional 47 flat attack. So if I input that into our flat attack, you'll see that my new effective attack from crit rate is actually higher than the attack percent that we had before. So let's take a look at that. So right now we're getting 3,986 of an effective attack from our crit rate. If we switch back, the effective attack from our attack percent is actually 3,971. So it is a minuscule difference, but this does effectively show that even the smallest of numbers can change what is going to be most effective on your circlet. And lastly, if you want to take a set bonus into account like Gladiator or Berserker, what you'll want to do for this set down here is make sure when you're inputting all your stats here, input your circlet stats as well. Then it will tell you, which set bonus would be most beneficial for your kit. So we can see all that information in action with this video that I have on screen comparing two different official builds. So the first one is going to be more focused on a well-rounded build, while the one on the right is going to be focused on a high attack and high crit damage. What we're going to end up seeing, though, is that while the build on the right is getting higher highs, it's also not getting crits as often, which leads to an overall drop-off in DPS. So even though it might not be as flashy, the build on the left will be much more consistent and lead to faster kills, which we will see here about a couple seconds. So while the difference in the video might not be super drastic, only a couple seconds, it's going to continue to scale as you level up your characters even further, ascend weapons, and increase your talents, and so on. So guys, that is the end of the video talking all about critical damage. I know there was a lot of information there, a lot of math, but hopefully, overall, it's made it a little bit easier for you to understand how you should be building your characters, how you should be optimizing crit rate versus crit damage, and, hopefully it'll help you in your upcoming builds, making sure that you're not hitting those bottlenecks. If you want to check out more content from me, you can head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazze, or you can subscribe to my YouTube right here, like the video if you liked it, and click that notification bell. That way you never miss a video. But guys, that's all I got for today. Hopefully you did enjoy, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.